Warning: the following content may contain elements that are not suitable for some audiences. Accordingly, viewer discretion is advised. Good Friday night, everyone. I am Dave, Don Corleone, or the Godfather, whichever you prefer. And here's my co-host, Phoenix. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Uh, Finally able to get back to work. Feels good. Break-in pain hurts, but we get there.
Yeah, I'm happy for you. I know it's got to be a relief.
Yeah, definitely. So I thought I'd let you tell everybody what we are doing this week and give a little background info and let everyone know who our special guest in the wings is.
Okay. Um, I guess I'll go ahead and bring our guest up first, maybe.
We can do that.
Okay, so this is Rex, and he has a show on our network called All Out Paranormal.
Discover
And,
the paranormal with
yeah,
All Out
that's All
Paranormal.
Out
Yep.
Paranormal. Sorry, Rex.
Hi, Dina.
I
It's
know
a
I
cheap
sound
shot.
so
Hi, Dina.
Hi, Dina. But he is a special guest for us tonight. He has quite an extensive history in law enforcement, so he's going to hopefully bring some of his expertise to the table. Tonight, we're talking about Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka,
Yep.
um, who were dubbed the Ken and Barbie. I don't know how many of you guys remember hearing about them, but it is actually quite a story. And there is an update on Carla Homolka that we will also be able to get into because it's some parts of that is a little baffling to me. And I already gave Rex a heads up for some questions I was going to have for him. Um, but by the time they were arrested, uh, what was it? Estimated crimes were about 30 victims
Yep.
total is what they're suspecting. Um, so, Dave, you want to take it from there, or you want me to?
Uh, yeah. So it takes place in Scarborough, Canada, and they were dubbed the Ken and Barbie Killers. Um, Paul Bernardo was 23 years old, 6 foot, good looking, um, went to the University of Toronto. Um, and Carla Homolka was 17 years old when they met. She was in high school and working at a pet shop. Canada's age of consent is 16, straight across the board. Um, the Homolka girl's parents welcomed Paul Bernardo with open arms. Um, and just he was like this Prince Charming. He could do no wrong. He was just welcomed into the fold right away. Um, when she sat down with Paul Bernardo at a dinner date with a coworker of hers, the coworker felt like a third wheel, so she had left. And Carla explained it as love at first sight. Um, and it in reality, you know, you can see how, you know, they blonde hair, blue eyes, perfect couple. Um, and Paul Bernardo had a very, very dark, sinister center to himself. A lot of the victims in Scarborough were taken at night from behind. Um, so they really could not say who um, the person was. They couldn't pinpoint it. And this time, DNA evidence was very few and far between, and how long it took. Like, it took so long to process DNA that was collected at this time. It sat on shelves for months and months at a time. One um, one police station and detective got together, got all the information, and they did a sketch in Scarborough uh, of what the individual was supposed to look like. Um, Male, white, 18 to 22 years, 5'10" to 6 foot, medium muscular build, uh, light colored eyes, possibly blue. Um, and that is almost a perfect artist renditioning of what Paul Bernardo looked like. Um, it
Also, until he met Carla, they said, sorry, Dave.
No, go ahead.
They it's reported that Paul was raping young women before he met Carla that had not murdered anyone. They said things started escalating periodically, starting with the time that he met Carla, which is part of what feeds into her claim of being a victim once they were arrested. Um, and then once videotape came out, and putting some more pieces together with the murder starting after she became involved. They no longer believed that she was one of his victims, but a very willing participant.
Yeah.
um, who and they just there was a psychologist. That's what I was just looking for, was a psychologist's name. I printed out too many papers. I've got 14 pages I printed plus my notes I wrote. um, but there was a psychologist who said that their relationship was very sadomasochistic, and with that they just fed off each other. you
Hmm.
know they just it just kept escalating throughout their relationship. Um, but it's a very sad story. I mean, of course, any crime is, but just what hit me personally, which we have not gotten into yet, is what Carla did to her little sister.
Yeah, definitely.
That being an older sister, that just really kind of haunted me for a while, and shows the deviousness that these two people had. It's not that you want to say in innocence it's better with a stranger. No, no, nobody should ever be a victim of a crime.
Yeah.
But when it's by someone that's supposed to love you and be one of your protectors, there's an extra violation of trust, and a betrayal that's there. So they were very, very mentally messed up people,
Yep,
you
they
know,
were.
just to
And
another whole level.
to go further back, Paul Bernardo was the youngest of three. Mother was verbally and physically abusive, constantly tearing him down all the time. When he was 16, he found out the person that he called dad his entire life, his mom, let it slip. Whether it was an abusive tactic or truth, we don't know, but found out that it wasn't his dad. That escalated things. Paul was known to be a peeping Tom looking into windows in his early teens. And as he got older, the fantasies started to get darker.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in September of 1983, um, in Scarborough, he started the University of Toronto. Paul had a few girlfriends at the start off. It was okay, but he turned dark and very abusive to them. Um, in Scarborough in 1987, or not, excuse me, 1988. So within 5 years of him being in Scarborough, there were 7 reports
Mm-hmm.
of sexual assault or attacks. Um, they that Scarborough mandated a curfew um, for people, and they'd get grabbed from behind. The gals would get grabbed from behind. They'd be forced to perform oral intercourse sodomy, and then they were beaten horribly afterwards. So there's a lot of rage after the fact in a situation like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they didn't have anybody to go for suspects other than that drawing. No one was pinning it on Paul because he was this quote unquote perfect person that everybody liked to be around, and the life of the party. The FBI did get called in, um, and they went through everything. Like I said, DNA was taken, um, and no links were ever given to go in the way of Paul Bernardo. By this time, it had grown to 11 victims in this amount of time. Um, and what the FBI said is this person, it's anger based, it's sadistic based. The person's a high functioning individual. Could be have tendencies of psychopathic, sadistic, a sexual deviant, um, and would have to have lived in the area that all of this was going on. So you have Carla Hamalco and now Paul Bernardo. A year into the relationship, this is going on of them dating. They met in the fall of 1987. In the fall time of 1987, there were 3 attacks while he was courting her. It's it started to actually come down on Paul pretty hard. Um, he was losing territory because people were closing in, so he decided to move to uh, St. Christie, I believe it is, isn't it? Phoenix, was it St. Christie is where she lived?
I believe that is, yes.
St. Christie. So he moved over there after 18 months of dating. During those 18 months, it was 80 miles one way. And he'd drive it several times in a week just to go and see her. Um, in the spring of 89, Carla graduates high school. So now we're talking, he's 6 years into these assaults, and the victims' lists are piling on and on. Um, Carla and Paul relationship started to get a little rocky, and Paul started verbally abusing her. In 1989, in December, they had a romantic getaway. Paul proposed. The parents were elated. They couldn't wait for it, and they had a spring wedding in 1991 in the spring. They were the perfect picturesque couple. 1 year prior, police had released the sketch, and there's still no connection. Now, Paul had moved to St. Christie. Scarborough did nothing for the crimes. Nothing happened, set off no red flags, nothing. It just stopped. That would raise a red flag for me. Um, Everybody saw Paul in the sketch and was telling her dad, hey, that looks like Paul joking around type. And they had it right. They did. They had it right. And nobody put two and two together. It was more of a razzing uh, than anything else. And November of 1990, several people called police and started to point the finger at Paul Bernardo. Now, these are just for the attacks of the women in Scarborough. They asked for a DNA sample. Paul did agree. It sat on the shelf waiting. It, the crime stopped in Scarborough, but they started in St. Catharines. That's what it is. St. Catharines. I will let you guys know from here on out, some of the images will be disturbing, hence the viewer discretion advised, along with some of the descriptions of the crimes that are going to take place from this moment on. Before I get to that part, though, I know Rex is probably chomping at the bit to get in and say, what is wrong with these people?
Mm-hmm.
As a
It's
law enforcement officer, back then you only had what tools you could work with. Maybe you guys had a computer back then, but you didn't have the internet. You didn't have quote unquote cell phones.
it
What's your take on how the FBI and local law enforcement handled it?
uh when it when they were first investigating the ones, and of course they had a sketch of him. It seemed like nobody really took it seriously on either side, the FBI or the local department. That's the way I look at it. I'm sure people are going to go, "Oh my God, how could you say such a thing?" Well, 31 years makes you pretty good at what you used to do. So it's disturbing to me that it was just like shutting the door. It was so quick about it, and you had people going, "Oh, that looks like so and so," blah blah blah, but yet nobody took it seriously, and it just kind of went on the back burner, and it should have been a clue when he moved away that, hey, you know what in the world? Why did they all stop all of a sudden? And I'm sure once they got married and were living together, that well, you said I don't know much about. I'm not going to pretend like I know a lot about this. I'm just giving you my perspective of as an officer and dealing with similar situations. Um, yeah, to me it's hard for me to hear about this because at the end of my career, we had everything that you needed, and it would have never gone. It all would have stayed in the main Scarsboro,
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
where it initially happened. It would have gotten taken care of then and there. But you're on the cusp of just starting with DNA, and what, there was only the FBI is the only one that had a place to do DNA.
Yeah, because they didn't
And
have like we have now, like DCI, which is Department of Criminal Investigation.
Right.
and our DNA goes right to Des Moines, and
Yep.
I mean we have it within 1 to 3 days. Um, you know, so it's not totally their fault, but I think they didn't. What do I want to say? Walk the streets and go through more of the motions and the areas where the bodies were found and etc. But then again, I'm not the FBI. I don't know how things were ran back then. But it's disturbing to me that these kids, this couple are so young and homely smokes. I mean, it's tough as an officer because it brings a lot of stuff back. I've seen stuff like that. I've dealt with murders, and it's a tough thing to do. But anyway, I'll
Yep.
start with that. How's that?
I absolutely agree.
Mhm.
So at this time, Paul has been around the family enough, and Paul is actually around Carla's sister, who's 15 years old, and he starts getting urges, very dark urges. And he starts, quote unquote, teasing and grooming, and things like that. And Paul turned to Carla and said, I want your sister, just flat out. And at
Mhm.
this time, you know, she wanted to make him happy. She didn't want to be beaten, verbally abused, things like that. So Carla actually gave Tammy to Paul Bernardo. The parents were out. They drugged she drugged her sister and put a rag of halothol over her mouth to keep her knocked out. Paul had his way with her. They taped it. And when Paul was done, he turned to Carla and said, Your turn. And she did. She sexually assaulted her sister.
Now
Eh,
I want to follow up with something real quick because
Yes, ma'am.
there's two different versions to this event. In one version, Paul told Carla, "I want your sister." And other news reports, one of the things that Paul was teasing Carla about is that she was not a virgin when he met her. She was getting too old. He liked his victims between a certain age group, and Carla was starting to get a little old. And
Mid 20s. Yep.
problem is that she was not a virgin when he met her, and he was fantasizing about virgins. And so, in other reports, it was stated that it was Carla's idea to offer her sister. She had noticed he was looking at the sister, so she offered. No, I don't know which way it goes. To me, I can't fathom either way. Me going along with it, but they did video record it, and Carla was either way it goes, whether she made the offer or whether he flat out said, I want your sister. She was very much a willing participant and ended up choking to death on her own vomit.
Yep. That was one theory.
Mm-hmm.
And the during or shortly after the sexual assault, and the drugging, she was choking, frothing at the mouth, is what
Mm-hmm.
Bernardo and Carla said. They rushed her to the hospital. She was intubated, and then later succumbed to her injuries. She was actually brain dead already, um, according to the coroner's report, which I had to securely download. I could view it all I wanted to, but it won't let me actually put it up there. The coroner's report that, ironically, she died of natural causes. The burns on her face where the rag was from stomach acid, which the next picture I'm going to put up is graphic. But looking at the evidence of the halothane, these are not what I would classify as stomach acid from throwing up.
No.
That is a chemical burn. I was a volunteer firefighter and EMT for 3.5 years. I was an over the road truck driver for 13 and a half years. I've come up on a lot of wrecks where people have chemical burns. It's no, those are chemical burns.
Yeah.
Now, later on, when everything came to light, later, Tammy was exhumed and they did find out that it was, in fact, chemical burning when they ran tests. They're trying, I mean, chemical burning and a rug burn, that I've had rug burns, not even close. That should have sent a red flag right there. So the parents of them are devastated, but never ever thought that Paul did anything. That just, I mean, it's adding fuel to the fire. He's gotten away with it again. Now
Right.
it's murder.
Well, and my heart goes out for the parents because for me, it wasn't just Paul. It's the fact that they were probably comforting Carla,
Yep.
feeling horrible for her losing her little sister and thinking, oh, the devastation that our daughter must be going through. So, as parents, they're going through the loss of a child, but probably also very concerned about their daughter who just lost a younger sibling, and they're probably trying to comfort her. And I mean, I can only imagine what the home was like with them trying to be there. No, because they covered it all up is what all the reports say. They covered it all up before um, letting anybody know there was a problem.
And
And they
honestly,
weren't looking for that.
yep,
She had large amounts of alcohol and sedatives. Carla worked for a veterinarian, wasn't it? A
yep.
veterinarian
And
clinic,
they
and
used
she brought home
tranquilizer.
sedatives. So they weren't thinking sexual abuse. It never crossed doctors' minds. They just see a young girl that they thought drank too much and maybe took too many drugs. And that's where their mind was. And, I mean, she didn't have obvious signs on the outside of her in that area to say, oh, this girl just recently had sex or was raped. There wasn't anything they could visually see on the outside like that to think, hey, we might need to look in and see if there's trauma.
Yep, yep.
So,
And if the evidence wasn't there to warrant something like that, the autopsy would have just been very routine.
right,
They there was no reason in their mind medically that there needed to be any DNA or further examination of the victim.
Which it's not their fault for not doing that. Back then, it wasn't considered part of the protocol. Now, it would have been.
Yep.
They would have checked for that automatically as part of the process. But back then, things have changed quite a bit between now and then. But you
right,
can't put the blame on anybody for that because obviously, if there wasn't any outside trauma that would trigger it, it wouldn't have been done.
No. No. So a month goes by, and Paul and Carla get their own place. Um, I will do a side note disclosure that the place that Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolko had is since been demolished. Paul's abuse went up extravagantly, just towards Carla alone. He would often joke that he was the Scarborough rapist. Um, and when she would want, you know, he'd threaten her that the tapes would be released to the police under her name as the victim if she threatened to leave. And she she was stuck. Essentially, she was stuck, or so she thought. June 15th of 1991, before the wedding, Paul had what he called a gift for Carla. A 14-year-old girl named Leslie Mahaffey. She was in her own backyard when he was driving around, and he offered her a cigarette and snatched her. They held her in their home, repeatedly assaulting, raping, and they recorded it all on tape. For 24 hours, this had gone on before she was strangled to death. Side note, the night that she was strangled to death, the next morning, the Homolkas gathered with their daughter at Carla and Paul Bernardo's house for Father's Day, and in the basement, 8 feet below their shoes, laying in a dark, dank basement, was the body of Leslie Mahaffey. And they were carrying on for Father's Day like there was nothing going on. As soon as the mom and dad of Carla left, Paul used a circular saw and dismembered Leslie Mahaffey and wrapped her in concrete blocks to weight her down, and dropped her body in Lake Gibson, where she would later be found by a local fisherman. Her body was found on July 19th, 1991, on a Wednesday. Not even a week and a half, 2 weeks after the Father's Day incident. They brought the same FBI profiler in to St. Catharines. And the exact words out of the FBI profiler's mouth is, "I have no clue why I am here. There is absolutely no reason I should be. This is no way connected to the Scarborough rapist. There is absolutely no connection." They still had no leads. Convenient enough, they still had no leads. And I laugh because now we have everything in front of you. It makes it easy to laugh, like, and bang your head against the wall, like, why can't you freaking figure it out, man? But that's because we have all the information in front of us.
Well, and the incredible thing, I'm interrupting again.
No,
Uh,
you're
the incredible thing is that in 1987, December of 1987, a tip had been called in by a friend's wife.
yep.
Um, and her name was Tina Smyrnis. I'm not sure how you pronounce some of these names, so just work with me.
Some of them were hard for me too.
Yes, I'm going to go with Smyrnis. But that was in 1987, but they never interviewed him. And then he was interviewed again on November 20th, 1990, for 35 minutes. And it says he voluntarily provided samples for forensic testing, and they found, and this again was, well, one was on a bank employee's tip, and I think the tip in 1990 was from the wife, that Tina Smyrnis. And police officials state that after interviewing him for that 35 minutes, that they found Paul Bernardo more credible than Tina Smyrnis,
Yep, yep.
which is just amazing considering everything we know, and that Tina Smyrnis actually was correct on her tip, and yet they found
Sociopathic
more
behavior.
credible. Yeah. And so to me, it just goes to show how conniving and manipulating that this Paul Bernardo actually was, that it wasn't just young girls and teenage girls or young adults that could be easier to manipulate. I mean, he was able to manipulate and deceive law enforcement, and be seen as a very credible person.
Um, Kathy Arnott said, "Is that because of the time that she was gone?" I'm not sure what you meant by that, Kathy. If you could elaborate on that a little bit, we'll gladly answer that question for you. Um, so, in the meantime, for the next year, police search for the person responsible for Leslie Mahaffey's murder. Paul and Carla, or Paul told Carla, I want you to start reaching out, getting a hold of your sister's friends, and inviting them over. And Carla did. More tapes were created. I can put it to you that way. Um, and several girls over the next year were raped, beaten, and videoed. They survived, but they're just the pure catastrophic trauma of it, even to try and wrap my head around, is unfathomably astonishing. I can't wrap my head around what kind of trauma they must have been going through at that age. So in April 16th of 1992, Paul and Carla went for a drive to, as Paul said, quote unquote, hunt for a sex slave. They found 15-year-old Christian French walking home from school, and they pulled into a church parking lot. Carla had a map, pretended to ask for directions, and they grabbed her.
Mm-hmm.
Kristen was reported missing. It was not like her to not show up, anything like that. The car was described as a beige Camaro. And And in that year, I could see, the different connection for a beige Camaro versus what the car actually was, which was a gold Nissan, is the car that actually snatched him. Police put this on billboards. Have you seen this gold Camaro? In the papers, on the news, on TV, everywhere, just plastered it everywhere. They were looking for the wrong car.
Mhm.
A lot of time was wasted. Stuff started linking up, and the ones that were linking it and putting two and two together from St. Catherine's crimes to Scarborough rapist crimes was the media. The media was the very first to make the connection. So the FBI profiler came back and he's like, oh, yeah, now I make the connection. I see where it's at. They kept Kristen French for days, and they taped and raped
Mhm.
and abused her for days before, again, signature move of Paul Bernardo, strangled and killed her. So to date, so far in the timeline, you have Tammy all the way on the left, the blonde, which would be Carla's 15-year-old sister, raped, taped, and killed. You have Leslie in the middle. She was raped, videoed, killed, and then dismembered. And now we have Christian French. Christian French was found in a ditch on April 30th of 1992. Ironically enough, I could not wrap my head around this. How convenient it is, but nobody, I don't think, make this connection of, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. I mean, Rex, you're my best friend. We hang out and talk every day. You know how my analytical mind works. I see little threads that other people don't see. They found this girl's remains in a ditch close to the local cemetery, literally where Leslie McAfee's parents laid her remains to rest. Like it's a marker. Tammy, her sister, is laid to rest there too,
Mhm.
all in the same cemetery. And now we have Christian was just dumped in a ditch right next to the cemetery where both of them are. And there's never any mention how nobody made that connection. In 1993, Paul beat uh, Carla up so bad that she had to go to the emergency room. I mean, pictures back then really weren't all that great, but you can literally see the purple around her eye.
Mhm.
So at this time in 1993, Carla actually left Paul. Their romance was at an end. The
She
per-
had a broken rib as well.
yep.
as the black eyes. So, um, it was a pretty severe beating, not just a couple blows to the face for a black eye. I mean, it apparently involved other parts of her body, and was it one broken rib or was it a couple? Either way, it was a pretty severe beating. So,
Okay, Kathy got back to us. The length of time that Leslie was missing, they kept her for a time so the cops didn't connect her with the rapist. I don't think that was their initial intention. From the evidence and everything that I've researched, um, they kept her just so they had a plaything. Um, and like I stated before, the night before Father's Day, she was strangled, and Father's Day, Carla's parents came over to celebrate Father's Day, and Leslie was laying in the basement, dead, under their feet. They were just, they were done with her. There, no connection had been made yet. He'd gotten away with it time and time again, and he's got a sociopathic mind where he's gotten away with it now. He doesn't have to worry about if they found it or not. Even if she is missing, nobody's pointed to him yet.
right. Rex, this could be a good place for you to chime in on your thoughts.
Yep.
Again, everybody's looking in the wrong direction or not putting the pieces together. There are so much outstanding similarities between everything. I don't understand why nothing's getting connected. You know, no matter if it's in Scarsboro or where they're at now, nothing is being connected. Dave is completely right about the cemetery. That would have been a huge red flag to me, but then again, this was, well, actually I was working at that time, but it just, I don't know. It's frustrating to see from the law enforcement side of things, but then again, it's a different time and a different place. But
Yep. Like
still,
Canada's SOPs, which when I say SOP, guys, I mean standard operating procedure. Canadian standard operating procedure may be different than what the United States standard operating procedure in, but yet they call in the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which is the United States.
right.
They're bringing them in.
Which everything that Canada goes by, their SOP is superseded by the FBI when they come in anyway. But still, it's like the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing.
Mm-hmm.
And this this should have been solved in Scarsboro.
It should have.
It really should have.
Mhm.
Um, it seems that a lot of things were just stepped over, and I think a lot of it they were like speculation, you know, and you can't build a case on speculation.
No.
Right.
And
This could have easily turned into an episode in the 90s of Unsolved Mysteries.
yes,
Mhm. Yeah.
absolutely.
Kathy's asking, is that why the cops didn't connect it? I think the cops weren't connecting a whole lot of it at all.
No, because
Not
80-mile difference between Scarborough and St. Catharines, unless Scarborough knew what was going on in St. Catherine, they they would have to phone them and tell them. It's not like the internet or broad stream media now where it gets posted on Facebook or something like that. You'd read about it in the newspaper if you got a national newspaper, if it made national headlines. Or St. Catharines would have had to know what was going on in Scarborough. St. Catharines is the first, their media outlet is the first one to actually make the connection, go to the police. The police actually call Scarborough. bring in the FBI profiler again. The FBI profiler says, okay, now I see the connection in Scarborough. 8 months before that, the FBI profiler says, this isn't connected. I don't even know why the hell I'm here. I feel like the
and
ball was dropped on multiple fronts.
and I think when they St. Catherine, it kind of put a big bump in the whole situation when they changed their MO.
Right.
When they killed her and dismembered her and threw in the river. So they're now looking at two different killings
Yep.
because the MOs are. I mean, they with that one they went completely off the chart, which really is a very rare thing in a serial killer to absolutely go over the top and for just one. And that that
Pathologist even said that there was absolutely emotion behind that one.
Yep.
There definitely was.
I want to back up a little bit, just real briefly, and throw in something that was stated. I went to a few different sources, but one thing that really hit me hard. I was reading about Paul Bernardo on Wikipedia, and it was stated that Tammy Homolka's virginity was given to Paul Bernardo as a Christmas present.
Yes.
If that gives you, I mean, we already know they're sick, but to me, that's just
It
a
escalated
little
so
more
quickly.
insight as to the depravity that you not only would participate in this horrific crime with your sister, but you would consider this a Christmas present.
Right.
I mean, what has to be going on in Carla Homolka's mind? First off, just to be involved in this, just with any of the victims, but then you look at her younger sister, but then you add to the fact that this is his Christmas present. You know, I cannot, like I said, I my heart goes out to all the victims and all the families, but I cannot wrap my head around Carla doing this with her younger sister.
and
We're supposed to protect our siblings and take care of them. And I think it hits me because I don't think most crimes of this nature involve younger siblings. I think it's normally strangers, and you have the siblings coming forward saying, I never saw this in my brother, or I never saw this in my sister, and they're kind of more defending them because the person they know is not this psycho out here murdering and raping people. That's their brother or father or sister or whoever. And so the fact that Carla involved her sister and considered it a Christmas present. When I read that it was a Christmas present, I mean, everything in me just sank. I just felt crushed because what a horrible, horrible thing to begin with for all of these victims. But to have your rape and murder and torture be considered a Christmas present to me was just another level of personalization. Um,
And it was on both fronts. They were both guilty of it.
yes, yes.
Both guilty of it.
It's horrible.
Well, guys, we are at our halfway point. Time to get a refreshment and get a breath of fresh air. If you think the first part of the podcast and our show was shocking, just wait until you hear what I have for you next. Welcome back, everybody, to our second hour. To give you guys uh, kind of a refresher, so to speak, we are talking about the Ken and Barbie killers from Canada, Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka. And when we left off, we were talking about in 1993, Paul had severely beaten Carla, which caused her to go to the ER. Carla ended up leaving Paul. The FBI is currently on his tail and starting to put connections together thanks to St. Catherine's media outlets finally making the connection and piecing things together. We have as our special guest weighing in uh, my best friend and my brother Rex, 31-year retired veteran of law enforcement, and we will bring him back up. So, are we ready for the second part of this?
I am.
Okay. So, do you remember when Paul had freely given his DNA? Well, they finally matched his DNA. They identified him. They got him. But there is a twist. And how I love my twists when it comes to cold case, true crime, and murder mystery. The cops got to Carla first. They're interviewing Carla and she's giving them all of this stuff. This is actual police crime scene footage of them showing up to the house in St. Catherine. Carla takes investigators, and to give you an idea, we already know how sociopathic and demented Paul Bernardo is, but this is how sociopathic and demented and dark Carla is. She's walking. I watched the video, actual footage of her walking through the house with detectives asking, "Hey, can I have that book? My sister wants it." Her sister's dead. Then, on top of that, and it struck me horridly, all of their victims range from early teens to late teens. She is dressed in what is equivocally a schoolgirl's uniform as she's parading the house with detectives. She rolled over on Paul Bernardo and confessed everything. This is where it takes a dark turn, and I know Rex is going to blow a head gasket on this when I tell him this. This is called the plea bargain deal with the devil. In exchange for her testimony and her rolling over on him, she fooled them all and she only got 12 years
Yes.
behind bars.
The victims, I wrote down the age range. They were 15 to 21.
So we have Paul Bernardo, and he looks like, yeah, he's not
I,
crazy
I
at all, right? And you've got her. Tell me that looks like a sane individual that has absolutely any empathy or any remorse for what she's done. I mean,
No,
look at the coldness in her eyes.
I was gonna say they have her dressed to try to give an appearance, but the look on her face and everything is just so indifferent to the situation.
They're mug shots.
Mm-hmm.
So, the question being, where are they now? Paul Bernardo is still sitting in prison and will be for the rest of his life. He has admitted to multiple other rapes and killings that they had not previously tied him to, that he free and willingly gave them details. Carla,
Dave, I want to tell him.
okay, go ahead.
I want to tell him because I can't get over this. I mean, I'm not done because I'm excited, like, haha, happy. No, I'm excited because, like, I just cannot fathom. She is out of prison. She was released in 2005, and she is a wife and mother of two children and a very active participant in her children's school activities, including PTA meetings, among other things. And that's why I wanted to tell you guys because as a mother of school children, I will tell you I do homeschool my 6 year old. She just turned 6 yesterday. So, but she's homeschooled. But if my children were in public school, this is not the person that I would want hanging around the school around children when she committed these kinds of crimes with minors.
My
And
wife said the exact same thing.
I can't wrap my head around it. And the community, she has moved back to the same community
Yep.
where her and her husband were recognized and put two and two together as to who she is. And they have done everything they can think of to try to have her removed and barred from school premises and from the community. And the response from authorities is, well, she has done her time. There's nothing we can do. So, I gave Rex a heads up for one of my questions, which I
I've got
understand.
a curveball for you before you do that, though.
Okay.
She is a wife to the brother of her lead attorney.
Yes, yes. Thank you because I did leave that out. Yes, the brother of her, yes, attorney. Yes, that is who she married. And but I asked Rex because I thought that there was automatically anytime there were crimes involving minors like that, I thought they automatically were not allowed to be near schools or other places such as that. Um, you know, and so that was my question for Rex because I said, I know I'm not going to be the only person questioning why. I understand she did her time. She can live in whatever community she chooses to, and there's not much law enforcement can do. But how in the world is this woman allowed to be going to PTA meetings and, um, going up to school Christmas parties and whatever else is going on at the school that she wants to be a part of and act like she's Miss, Betty Homemaker or something,
Well,
And
you got to remember at that time, though, when she rolled over on Paul Bernardo and made that deal, she told them flat out, he made me do it. I
that,
didn't have a choice. I was afraid for my life. And
that's true.
so they didn't connect her with a forcible sex crime either.
That's true. That's true. I get that. I just it makes me sick to my stomach to think of her up there around all these children.
Oh yeah.
As I believe, and they did buy that she was a victim at first, but once the videotape surfaced, the deal had already been made. They couldn't
Yep.
renege on it. It was already done. But then the videotape surfaced, and they're watching the videotape, and they realize she was not a victim. I mean, yes, of the beatings that she got at the end or whatever, but as
But
far as
she was a willing participant.
crimes, she was not a victim when it came to these crimes. She was not forced. She was a very willing participant and have participated in the sexual assault of more than just one victim. They had recorded a few of them, and so they're watching her role and realizing they were duped.
Yep.
And so I guess that's an aspect that I had not thought of, is that at the time the deal was made, it just makes my skin crawl to think that, if she could do this then, I don't think I'm just going to say I think she's a pedo. And I don't think you just change. I don't think sitting in prison for 12 years, she went in being this sadistic person and came out 12 years later, Miss Betty Homemaker. You know,
Exactly.
it makes my skin crawl.
And I'm pretty sure, Kathy Arnett, I'm pretty sure that he knows about him and he knows the ins
Right.
and outs
I'm sorry.
of the case, for the simple fact that his brother was the lead counsel for her defense. So I believe that he knows about it.
He'd, he'd have to.
Yep.
I mean,
And I'm sorry to have children with someone like that. You, there's something wrong up in the brain. I'm
there's a
sorry.
head full of bad wiring there.
It must be the water.
You're in Canada. Don't drink the water and don't breathe the air.
I know, eh?
Um, I to follow up with Phoenix's question, and if this would have been in the United States, she would not be out of jail, and they
No.
would have never given her a plea bargain like that. No way.
And I guarantee
And
you that's exactly what happened, is they were bound by the plea agreement because it would have been double jeopardy.
I think with them giving her that plea bargain, because they didn't want it to be looked at for so long because so much stuff was overlooked.
Yep.
And they went ahead and did this so they could get him and get it taken care of, and end of story. And unfortunately, the laws in Canada are way different than they are here.
Right.
Extremely different. Um, I I don't think it's right that she's out and about and she's allowed to do what she does. Um, but then again, it's a different country, so it's mind-boggling to me. But they must have the same laws as us. You can't retry somebody like murder. Once somebody has been found not guilty, you can't turn around, no matter what kind of evidence you find. And I believe this is the same thing with her plea bargain. It's been done, it's been signed, sealed, and delivered. You can't come back and renege on it and try to, you know, make her be part of it and be sentenced to a harsher crime. That's my take on it. Like I said, if it was here in the United States, she'd be still sitting in prison. I guarantee it.
Hi, Evelyn. Okay, so Kathy says something here. She said here they would have found a loophole to charge her with. What are your? I mean, is that how you think they would have been able to come back after making a deal, or do you think that they just wouldn't have offered that deal to begin with?
They wouldn't have. Not that quickly. There's no way they would have offered that quickly, even though she confesses everything. You still don't. There's not a timeline built. You don't have everything that you should. But like I said, because things were overlooked and weren't taken care of, they didn't want to lose face. So they offered what they did to get it quickly as done. Here,
Right.
it never would have been done. It would have been at least a year to 2 years of more going through the evidence, getting everything together, and it would have been a totally different thing here in the United States.
And the only way I could see them having to do go with it, go after Bernardo for what they have on him, string him out long enough, drop all charges against her, kill the plea bargain right outright. But if they knew they were being duped at the time, and then turn around and go back after her and put them both on trial.
Yeah.
Do you guys want to know a secret?
Yes, please.
Of course.
I've got the plea agreement.
Do you?
Oh, do tell.
Oh,
Ah. So, what we have here is Homolka's plea bargain revealed. She spends her days locked in a cell in a prison for women in Kingston, Ontario, isolated from other inmates for her own protection. Her only diversions are a television set, an hour of daily exercise in the prison yard, and the correspondence courses in sociology she takes through nearby Queen's University. 25-year-old Carla Homolka says she has more freedom in prison, where she is serving a concurrent 12-year sentence for manslaughter, in the slangs of Christian French and Leslie Mahaffey, than she has ever had at in the St. Catharines, Ontario home she shared with her former husband, now 30-year-old Paul Bernardo. Last week in the Ontario courtroom where Bernardo is on trial for first-degree murder in the killings, she said she obtained that freedom by cutting a deal with Crown officials under which she would receive a fixed sentence in exchange for testifying against her former husband, and she acknowledged that she left her husband only after she concluded that she was destined to be his next victim. Homolka revealed the details of her previously secret plea bargain negotiations for the first time at the conclusion of 9 days of questioning by Crown attorney Ray Houlihan. The deal reached mid-May 1993 after extensive negotiations between her lawyer and senior Crown officials in Toronto caused a public uproar when rumors of its existence began to circulate around the time of her trial 2 months later. Homolka testified that the agreement required her to tell the truth and could be canceled if authorities learned that it was she who had actually carried out the killing of either French or Mahaffey. Under Houlihan's questioning, she maintained that her former husband strangled both girls with a black electrical cord, but Bernardo's principal lawyer, Josh Rosen, was expected to attack her story, her credibility, and the deal struck with the Crown in searching cross-examination that was scheduled to begin on July 4th and last for several days. Despite the apparent safeguards in the agreement, Homolka's deal raised a number of long-standing public concerns about such negotiations, particularly when they involve serious crimes. Many lawyers admit that such privately negotiated plea bargains create skepticism about the justice system. But they also argue that prearranged guilty pleas and sentences are essential to keeping the system working. Ronald, well, yeah, I'm not even going to try that. Um, Professor of criminal law at Queen's University and former Ontario provincial court judge, said that in about 90% of criminal cases, the accused person either pleads guilty voluntarily or makes a deal. If we try to establish bargaining, there's no way on God's green earth that our society could afford the trials. I get that. Yeah, I do. Um, I will scroll down here. In his opening address to the 8-man, 4-woman jury, Houlihan said the Crown had made a deal 16 months before opening, 3.5 hours of explicit homemade videotapes depicting sexual assaults of French and Mahaffey. The tapes, which have been shown to the jury, contain 6-minute segments in which Homolka and Bernardo sexually assaulted her drugged and unconscious 15-year-old sister Tammy, who, quote unquote, you can use your own speculation, choked to death on her own vomit shortly after the attack ended early on the morning of December 24th, 1990. There's footage of another incident of another teenage girl known only as Jane Doe who survived the attack, expected to testify against Bernardo. Homoko's deal shields her from prosecution, however, for these incidents or any other crime, provided she disclosed her involvement. Basically, if she told the story and her involvement, she'd get a slap on the wrist, which is essentially what she had gotten. As she testified about her negotiations with the Crown, Homolka contradicted previous published accounts of how police came to suspect Bernardo's involvement. Spokesperson for the Metro Toronto Police previously claimed that their own investigative efforts had led them to Bernardo, who lived with his parents in Toronto's suburb of Scarborough before moving to St. Catharines in early 91. But Homolka said that she brought him to their attention when she contacted police on February 9th of 1993 and in an interview with two police officers divulged certain information about her former husband. 2 days later, she met with a Niagara Falls lawyer, George Walker, and on February 13, she authorized him to seek a quote unquote blanket immunity in exchange for information relating to the murders of French and Mahaffey.
Dina, I agree with you. I think she deserved to be locked away for life. I think they had enough evidence that they could have gotten Paul without making that kind of a deal with her. Or there should have been something in that where they could have reneged
And that's the
upon
problem.
seeing the tapes. Um, there that's what I have had covered in the beginning, Kathy, is they're estimating that Paul's victims before he met Carla and after meeting her is somewhere around 30 victims. And in that 30 included attempted rapes as well. So
Yep.
it's approximately 30 with women who were actually raped and also including attempted rapes.
Yep.
But that's throughout Paul's whole span, like I said, before and after Carla.
And I think that's how she duped them though. When they're talking about duped and made a deal with the devil is because she led two police officers to Paul Bernardo and made that connection. And she admits to 2 days later getting a hold of a lawyer in Niagara Falls. No, that's too coincidental. Get
Yep.
me blanket immunity. She knew what she was doing.
Right, right. Um, Also, Kathy had stated a little bit earlier that she bets Carla's husband never saw the tapes. I don't know, being the brother of her attorney, I don't know if he was there in the courtroom, because I don't know when he decided he was interested. Was it during the trial? Was it after she was sitting in prison? I
It's
don't know.
after he bumped his head really hard.
That's what I'm like. Something has to be wrong with him. But I mean, I don't know if he saw it or not, but I know he knows about it. There's no way he doesn't know that the tapes exist and that she was a willing participant. Um,
I
I just
absolutely agree with you, Dina.
crazy. Yeah,
Absolutely.
same here. I think the whole thing is just tragic. I do have concern for the community where Carla is now. Paul Bernardo, he's never going to get out of prison. He was sentenced to life with it was no possibility of parole.
Yep.
Um, but she is still out. And so I have concern, because it was stated that she had, even though she had this squeaky clean appearance and, just seemed to be, just a sweet little innocent girl before meeting Paul, she still had, it came out that she had still had some of these tendencies and stuff that just hadn't come out. And that was part of what really connected for her and Paul when they met, is they finally met somebody that, one, there was instant attraction to physically, but also they shared some of the dark urges, I guess you could say.
And she played that I'm innocent, naive, don't do nothing, just do what I'm told, housewife thing to AT. And
Mhm.
honestly, if Paul Bernardo's lawyers were smart and, you know, from that standpoint, the way she played her hand, what she had the worst Texas Hold'em hand and she turned it into $1 billion because she orchestrated that out so good. She almost looks like the marionette playing the strings of the puppet.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. But I do worry about the community, the children that she's around, because I just don't know that she's cured from these urges that she's had. Um, and even if she has them, how long is she going to be able to control them?
Right, and I agree with
Right.
Kathy. Sociopaths can fool people. She
Right,
could have had him convinced of it too. And
Yeah.
it's on that excerpt that I read about when she was in prison. She was going to college for sociology. That's
right,
basically learning how to manipulate the system, finding the ins and outs, body language, how to present yourself, everything. But I
right.
mean,
Mhm.
even now, you go from where'd I put that photo? It's here somewhere. You go from this look when she was on trial
Hmm.
and how cold, lifeless, and hollow her eyes and expression are to what she looks like now. It's not any different.
No, she looks the same. And this was during her interview. Wasn't that picture done during an
Yep.
interview where she's discussing this? And, I would think that if she had any remorse or, any shred of decency in her, there would have been some emotion present.
And you know what the saddest part of this entire thing is? The absolute saddest part is there are actually three murders. And Tammy's, it wasn't until years later hers was classified as a murder. Now,
Right,
yes, it's three murders. But for a while, she just fell by the wayside. Her voice was snuffed out quiet. And it was only Leslie and Kristen.
right. Yeah,
You know, her taking the college courses on sociology makes sense. She knows she's going to get out. So she's studying sociology. So when she gets back out, she knows how to fit in with the community and society.
Yep.
That's exactly why she took that. I'll guarantee it. Because look at her. She walked out, you know, changed person, and she fit right back into the community. She gets married, she has children, you know, she has a loving husband, a nice house. She's on the PTA board for her kids'. There you go. That's exactly why she took the course.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna throw this out there too, that my heart goes out to her children.
Absolutely. Could you
They
imagine the bullying?
they have no say. Our children have no say in who their parents are.
Right.
We pick that when we pick the person and we procreate. We pick the other parent for our children. But the children have no say. So they are 100%. I guess that's the point I'm trying to get to. What their mother did and who she was, who she is, her children are innocent of that. Yet they're going to pay a heavy price just for being her children.
Mhm.
You know,
And
um, because people are going to be looking at them. Hopefully people will be decent enough that the adults will not harass the children and will understand they have nothing to do with who their mother is.
right.
But
Uh,
it's eternal for them.
but
It's
they're going
eternal.
to know. They're right. They're going to know who their mother is, what she did. And it doesn't mean, even though the adults hopefully won't be making comments, that they're not going to be still looking at them with a little bit of stigmatism, because they're still her children. And kids are going to be saying things. They're going to suffer certain consequences as a result. Yes, I agree with that too, Kathy. A lot of it depends on how she raises them, but they're still innocent of her crimes. I just hope that whatever was going on with her mentally, that does not pass on to her children.
And another thing, I agree with you totally, Phoenix. I do. The other thing is, how long can they keep all of the facts and the secrets away from her children? Eventually, they're going to find out.
I'm sure
And
they do know, because the police were called to the house on numerous occasions because of people outside picketing. There was spray paint on her house. There was all kinds of stuff where the community, they couldn't get her out legally. The police were like, "Well, she's done her time. There's nothing we can do." So they began to harass her and her husband, just trying to get them frustrated enough that they would voluntarily just move out of the community to get away from it. So, the children were seeing all this and had to be asking questions. Why are they doing this to us? Mom, why are they saying you killed people or whatever? But they had to be seeing signs, words spray painted on the house. Carla had called the police on a few occasions, and it became a big ordeal up there, where the police finally told the community, "Y'all are breaking the law. She has done her time. You cannot be harassing her and her family and doing this."
that's where the sociology comes in again. She's using it
Mhm.
on her kids, telling her what society is doing, even though she didn't do this. And and the whole thing is, I feel so sorry for the children too, because they're scarred no matter what.
Yep.
They're marked for the rest of their lives,
Yeah.
having to live with the past and the present of their mother.
The sins of the mother have been laid on the children.
Yes.
Right.
And I can't even imagine the kind of, I'm going to say, mind screw that she has done to those kids as well, to save face with her own children.
Mm-hmm.
And you know she has done it because she manipulated everything from the time that they were caught, and she's still doing the same thing now, except she has perfected it almost and knows that she can. And unfortunately, like I said, there's nothing we can do about it. It's frustrating, but it's so heartbreaking to think that the empathy doesn't even exist in her.
Right.
Although she plays the part, but she's not.
And I
And
don't know honestly how she could be a loving, caring mother when you can visually see her humanity is turned off.
Right.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, that's what I was saying. Like I said, I'm not trying to say that her sister is a more important person than the other victims. I want to be very clear. I'm not, making any comparison that way. But because I knew she was a mother and stuff, that's why I tried to say it's not that the crime is worse in itself or that her sister's more of a victim. What happened to all of them is equally horrendous. But it was that violation of familial trust and love. You don't have that with a stranger, but
right,
when it's family, or a spouse or whatever, it's a violation. You not only have the crime in itself that you may suffer, but now you've added that violation of trust and that violation of love onto it in that one particular case. And so to think of her being a mother, if she had no empathy for her sister, no more concern and love for her sister than that, how's she going to have it for her children? You know,
exactly.
I and that's kind of, like I said, just having siblings. I'm the oldest of the siblings. I'm the oldest of the grandchildren. I'm just the oldest. I don't care if it's my cousins, my sister. I don't care who it is. I can't fathom doing anything to violate that love and trust. I've maybe said things that make them mad when arguing and have to go back and say, hey, sorry. But to violate the trust, and damage a relationship on any level, I can't imagine doing that. And so to see where that she didn't just do something trivial, what might be, well, I say trivial in comparison to what happened, but it wasn't something small. This was major violation of trust. And so if you cannot have some shred of decency towards a stranger, much less love and compassion for your own sister, how do you become a mother and love your children and raise them and teach them the way that they should be loved, the way they should be taught? I don't think they're probably lacking a whole lot. Dina, let me see what you just asked. Sorry, my eyes are bothering me tonight. I'm having to wear my glasses more than usual. So what happened with her parents and family when this came out? Oh, do they see the grandchildren?
They don't. I actually just looked it up. They actually pulled up stakes and booked, and I don't blame them.
Yeah,
They
Yeah.
were lied to, you know, killed their daughter, you know, and they just I would too. I just disappear if
Well,
it
yeah,
came
and you,
down to that.
you can imagine they probably went through a lot of harassment being the parents. A lot of people
oh,
probably looked at her parents saying, you raised her.
well, and
How
they
did
were probably,
you raise her to be this person? And they probably got a lot of blame put on them for being the parents.
well, I'm sure
And
they were being accused of knowing about it too. I bet you everything that I have that the media or whatever was coming out and saying to them, you had to have known about this. You knew about this. Even though they didn't, it doesn't make a bit of difference. It doesn't matter. You're two people against an entire society. I would
People
have
want
pulled up
to blame
stakes.
everybody and find fault, to try to rationalize it in some way, because there is no rationalization. People who think normal, we can't really, excuse me, we can't really put it together in a way that makes sense the way we want it to. We
Right.
want to, I think, take it all and put it in a nice, neat box with a pretty bow on it and say, now here it is, I've got it. And to some extent, we can do that, but also to another extent we can't. There's still aspects that we're like, I can't fathom this, I don't understand this, but because people want all these pretty little bows and stuff and say, oh, I've got it all and it just fits all inside this little box, they've got to look at her kids. Well, your mom and you're a product of her. Well, your parents, and y'all raised her. And so it's got to spread out the anger and the emotion that people have. And I think that's just part of human nature.
Yeah.
I think even Paul's dad got on and said that she got away with it in an interview on September 6th of 2013. Um, as his sex killer son sits in a new prison cell thanks to the pending close of his old home, Paul Bernardo's father says his opinion, Carla Homolka should be locked up behind bars too.
Yep.
Um, Kingston Penitentiary shutting its doors after 179 years. Ken Bernardo said it's not easy as a parent of such a notorious killer and understands it's worse for the families of those he was convicted of murdering. So, there's obviously empathy on that side of the fence. How did it not get handed down? We know he had issues with his mother, but
You don't ever want to admit that your child has done wrong.
no.
You know, and it's I don't blame her family for pulling up stakes and getting away, and I don't blame them for not wanting to see the grandchildren,
Mhm.
because not only did they lose a daughter to murder, they've also lost their only other child to what she has done. You
Yep.
know, there's no connection. I can't imagine. That's my only fear in life. I'm not afraid of anything. I'm just afraid of losing one of my children.
Yep.
Right.
That's it. You should never outlive your children, is the
Right.
way I see things. And it's mind-boggling. Again, it's in a different country, different laws, but yet it still comes down to the same ethics. You know, the sociology of it, the psychology of it. It's still the same there as it would be here, but unfortunately, it's a heart hardening thing
Mhm.
to see this. And I could keep going on and on and on, but anyway, that was I can't even put it into words right now. Sorry. So on to the next question.
What
Um,
do you find it? I mean, we went through this with the whole Casey Anthony case in our first show, where cops let her lead them on this whole tangent, and it was supposed to be part of the investigation going to Universal Studios and such. Do you think it was ill played that the cops are like, here, take us through the house, tell us what's going on, and reliving and putting her back in that situation?
Yes and no. I mean, she's voluntarily giving all this, and you still got to do your side of the law, which you swore to do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she's willing to take you back through. You go through, um, and do it. It's I don't know. It's kind of a double edged sword, I guess. Um,
because in I realize you haven't seen the video of the actual walkthrough of the house. I did. Uh, I feel like it was acted and orchestrated in her behaviors
Oh,
a
I'm
lot.
sure.
Like she was taking advantage of that situation, knowing that there was a camera there. And
Yes.
Yeah.
like you were saying on sociology and her coming and preparing to get back into society, I honestly think she took it as well to put on a facade of humanity because once she's stripped away of that facade, you can literally see right through her.
Right.
Yes.
Well, I think, that, since you brought up um, Casey Anthony, as well, um, I think it's easier. I think what hurt Casey Anthony was all of her lying and why
Mhm.
they zeroed in on her. But as far as them letting her lead them down some rabbit holes and stuff, I think to some degree with both of these women, everybody says they were very considered to be very attractive women. They didn't look the part of a killer. And for Carla, um, to be a serial rapist and and murder or whatever, she sure didn't look like she would do that. And I think society as a whole, we kind of in our mind we look at people and think, this person doesn't fit the stereotype I have in my mind of what this person should look like.
And see, that's
Or this person looks like they're crazy, yet that person could be the most sane person. But we have stereotypes, preconceived stereotypes in our mind, and we kind of tried. That's kind of what I was saying. We want to put everything into this box to
And
where
that's
it all makes sense, and yet we can't always look at somebody and judge. And I think part of what made it easy for them to make a deal, and I'm not in law enforcement like Dave. I was also a firefighter EMT for several years. But and I've seen domestic violence cases and stuff where I'm walking in, and I have to be honest, even I could look at the people and say, oh yeah, okay, they look like the kind of people that'd be involved in this. And I know that sounds terrible, but then there were other times that the person being accused of stabbing the knife in the victim's thigh, I'm looking at her like, her? She did this, because it just doesn't fit the image that I would see for that behavior. And so I think on some level, we're all kind of guilty for that. So when they're seeing her, they put the picture up earlier of her with the black eyes, and she had at least one broken rib. I don't remember if it was one or two broken ribs, but at least one broken rib. So they're seeing that she's been abused and, probably claiming she was scared for her own life. And so she had to do this. And, and she didn't look like a typical psycho for what we would think of. So I think
right.
it's easier for them to kind of buy into it and maybe say, well, she might have played a little bit more of a role than what we know, but I don't think they looked at her and saw somebody that they could make the jump to who she really was until the
Because
videotapes came out. And then they're looking at it like, oh crap,
yeah,
right.
because
really
I
got
judged a book by the cover when I first started getting into this. You know, how did she get to this point? And I think it was dipping her toes in a few times and then went in head first because you don't go from this right here, you know, to absolutely nothing.
right.
It's almost borderline, looks like possession of a just that look in her eye and something. is definitely wrong with this dude. I mean, even now,
Well,
this is his latest prison photo.
yeah.
It's still there. The coldness.
Don't you say I look like him.
I saw a little resemblance, Rex.
I knew. I'm going, no.
I, I was gonna wait till after the show, and now I was gonna say, "All right, Rex."
But
And
honestly, what made that happen, and I'm part of it. Yeah, I can see the master manipulation. He's an older guy. She fell in love with him. She bragged about it the entire time she was had left in high school. You know, I guarantee you, it was these three. And honestly, I hope to God she relives it every night and she gets no rest.
And Dina, yes, some at least in some prisons they are allowed to because they'll have they can pay other prisoners to make jewelry for gifts or things like that. So I
it's
know I don't know about every prison, but I know at least some prisons allow them to make like different types of jewelry, necklaces or other things or
they get a
whatever.
lot more freedom in prison than people think.
Yep, it's easier to do a stint in prison than it is a month in county jail.
Yeah. Well,
I've heard that more than once.
and there he's in Canada, so I don't know what the prison system is like compared to here, but I know here in America there are at least in some prisons they are allowed to wear um, necklaces or potentially
Well,
earrings and stuff.
if it's anything to do with their religion, a cross, you know, Buddha or whatever, they have to allow them to do it. They
Mhm.
can't tell them they can't wear it. It's the same thing in a county jail.
Right.
But you were getting back, it's society when they say, well, it doesn't look like they're, a murderer. What is a murderer supposed to look like?
Well, really, I mean,
Look
look at Ted Bundy.
Yeah,
right, or Richard
everybody.
Ramirez. I mean,
Yeah,
they were all
everybody.
charismatic,
Right. That's
just
why
like Paul. He was very charismatic, good looking.
right. Yeah. That's why I've said before is, um, if people came walking up to us with devil horns and a pitchfork and a long tail, and every time they spoke, fire came out or something, we'd see them coming a mile away and we'd all take off running, you know. But how a lot of these people, I don't care if you're talking a domestic violence situation in your home, I don't care if you're talking about somebody like Paul Bernardo or Ted Bundy or whatever. A lot of these situations occur because they don't look the part.
Yep.
And so, you meet this person and you start dating him and they seem to be everything you could want. And then all of a sudden when they're comfortable enough, that wall comes down and next thing you know, they're beating on you. Or like in this situation, Paul and Carla, neither one looked the part. And, so when they're asking for directions, saying I'm lost, whatever, these young girls, they didn't look like scary people
And
to
honestly,
young women.
with Kristen, she actually did leave clues behind because her parents had been telling her, like be careful. I know in that parking lot they found a chew,
Sure. Yeah.
a chewed up pen cap, and then a piece of paper that had her name on it or something like that. And the neighbor across the street had actually seen the car, and from
Right.
that distance in a in a upper level apartment. Yeah, unless you have binoculars, you're not gonna know if it's a Camaro. But
Right.
so, but
And
go ahead.
and again, it's I'm going to use myself as an example for stereotyping somebody. I mean, because the way I look, I'm bald, I've got a goatee, I'm 6'7" and 300 pounds, I have tattoos, and I've been accused of being, a skinhead. I was actually in a class where somebody actually did that to me, and it was the person giving the lecture.
Oh wow.
And if anybody knows me, I'm a gentle giant. There's
Yeah, you're a big teddy bear.
and but I've been accused of that. Well, you couldn't be a cop because you have tattoos. All my tattoos have to do with my religion or with my family, except for, of course, you don't look like a cop.
I can verify he was actually, that's a good story. He arrested my father once.
Twice.
Oh, twice. Okay.
Y'all have to tell me that story later.
Um, and you're right. I've been accused of that, saying, "Oh, you're full of crap. You don't look like a cop." Well, things have changed. You know, After 9/11, a lot of officers started getting tattoos in remembrances of the fallen ones. And whether you like a cop or you hate a cop, I've lost a lot of people in law enforcement, and that thin blue line is still there, and a lot of us still walk the line. You know, I had to quit. It was taking a toll on my body, and I couldn't put my family through it anymore. You know, and it wasn't the job that I started with 31 years ago.
Right.
The tattoos, or if people look at it, they know there's quotes from the Bible. There's crosses. I have many crosses on me, and remembrances of my mother and father. You know, um,
I've got some of the
it's
guard on my
easy.
arm.
It's easy to point the finger, but when you're pointing a finger at somebody, there's three more pointing back at you.
Yep, that's what
So
he
Right.
said.
walk a thin line. You know, just because I look the way I do, you're completely wrong at what you see on the outside. So
Yep,
anyway,
I
I'll
was,
get off. I'll
that's
get
the
off that.
cover.
I was going to say, Rex, believe it or not, this is something I never told. Well, it never came up, but I had to laugh when you brought that up because I was sitting in a group meeting one day and they were talking about stereotypes. And this was many, many years ago, probably 30 years ago. And they were giving the description of different types of people. And all of a sudden they get to prostitutes and they're giving certain things. And all of a sudden they get down to, and a lot of times they'll be sitting there chewing bubble gum, and a lot of this stuff applied to me, and at that moment I'm actually chewing bubble gum all the way down to the bubble gum. And I'm going to tell you, every head in the room turned and looked at me, and they're all going, and all of a sudden the instructor turns and looks at me and says, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to apply you."
I
Like,
didn't get that.
you
But
just kind of gave something. And I spit my gum out real quick. I didn't keep chewing gum. I
That would
did.
have been a
I was
oh
finding
shit
paper,
moment.
spitting it out. So that's why when you said some of that, that's why I bust out laughing because I was like, yeah, I've had one of those moments. And trust me, I was not a prostitute. I don't know how they came up with some of what they did, you know.
Right.
But I mean, how do you even say, yeah, a prostitute goes around chewing bubble gum? But I mean, they did all the way down to that, and every head in there just immediately to me. And I'm like, wait a minute, wait.
Yes, Dina, her parents did disown her shortly after everything went down. They pulled up stakes and just left.
Yeah.
There's speculation on where they live and stuff like that, but nothing is evident or confirmed as of yet. Well,
Right.
Rex, before we sign off, I know you said you wanted to do a little research and before the show, but you stated you didn't get into it as much as you wanted to. But I'm actually glad that you didn't because I think we got some real raw reaction out of you when things came up.
I agree.
And I thought about going into it, but you know what? I agree. I wanted to go into it as a fresh pair of eyes from me being a person as well as being in law enforcement and a father, you know.
Yep.
And I agree with you. I'm glad I didn't. And if you have me on again, I'm going to do the same thing if I don't know about the case. So,
Oh, I guarantee you'll be on again.
oh,
And thank you for being
I don't know.
on.
I'll have to look at my schedule, but
Well,
I would
whatever
be
it is, you clear it.
be back. I'm honored that you had me on. I truly am, and a
I
fantastic
appreciate
show.
it, Rex.
Yeah, it was great. It
I,
was
I,
great.
I really appreciate you coming on and giving some insight and, just sharing. And of course, I love Dave. He's. I mean, we had to cancel last week. This was supposed to be our show last week, and I'm sorry to those who were waiting for the show, but life happens sometimes. But we're back now, and it was great being on here with both of you. I love doing the show with Dave and Rex. It's always great to work with you. So,
Absolutely.
Dina, thank you very much.
yes.
That's I'm speechless. Thank you. I try my best.
I appreciate everybody who joined us tonight and commented and gave some input. Excellent questions. There was a lot of excellent questions,
Definitely a
and
lot
I
of
really appreciate
participation from them.
it. Yeah,
I like that. I like that because sometimes it can make you look at something completely different. So
exactly.
I want to thank everyone in the comments too.
Yes,
And
it was
I just want to say, look at Dave's shirt.
great.
Representing.
That's right. That's my
Hey,
little brother
oh,
for you.
oh, well,
Thank
we're
you,
getting
Ken.
down to that time. I want to thank Rex, Phoenix, as always, and everybody in the comments. Just remember, guys, keep your eyes peeled. Don't judge a book by its cover, and look at the small facts because it leads to very, very big outcomes. Good night, guys.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.